me try to get into this business of compactness today with fundamental thing. So let's recall various things that we have had so far. Okay. So first, given any metric space, we have many concepts now. Okay. One is the notion of open sets, which is the basic building block of the so called topological ideas. Then on the other side of the closed side, the flip side of the open sets. Then we had the notion of sequences Okay, so these are some kind of convergence related notions. We had the notion of bounded sets, so these are at least acceptability. I have brought everything in this now. So we have this open sets, we have this closed sets, sequences, convergence, boundedness, total boundedness. So, and some of the two important theorems that we got from real line and which finally said how we generalize to the spaces, which gave us the notion of total boundedness, are the two basic theorems called the Bolzano-Weierstrass and the Cantor's intersection property. So one, the Bolzano theorem, which said that every totally bounded, now in a metric space we are going to talk about. So, in a complete metric space, has a limit point. So, it is sort of using these ideas of level 2 and 3, convergence notions, sequences and total boundedness. Okay. And the second property we had, which is actually a consequence of this, is the Cantor's intersection property, which will come into play a little later, but I will state it. This brings in the closed sets, properties of the closed sets. Okay. So, therefore, would have got this, would have had something to do with this and something, this theorem deals with those things. Okay. What does that say? If Fn is a sequence of non-empty closed totally bounded sets in a complete metric space, than or equal to Fn, that is non-increasing, then if the diameter of the sets goes to 0, then the intersection is not only non-empty, is a singleton. Empty set contains exactly one point. So this links, for example, closed sets, completeness, okay, and totally bounded. So the interplay between all these fellows. And we keep bringing in this completeness because we are modeling on the real line, on the real numbers, which is complete. Therefore, we are borrowing properties from the real numbers which fall off from the fundamental property of the completeness of the real, and borrowing this completeness statements. Now, I have not proved these two things, maybe time permitting, the proof we did, but anyway, if time permits, I will come back to this proof in the end. Okay. Now what I will do is, so far we introduced the notion of open sets, but we left them in the lurch. I would really, okay. Now I will, with the notion that the open sets as building blocks. Okay. So suppose X row is a metric space and G is any collection, is a collection. Say G is a collection of open sets in this metric space such that you can build a whole space with this. That is, what does that mean? Build means the only thing I can do with sets is union or intersection. Basically, if I am doing intersection, I am going down, I am not building much. So I have to take the, so what I will do basically, that I can build the whole set X by using all these G elements. That is, I will put it as union of all the sets G such that G belongs to this collection. If you and take their union, definitely this is part of G, because every G is in this metric space. They are all open sets in the metric space, so their union will be there. But what this says is the union is exactly equal. What does that mean? That is, for every X in X, there is at least one G in this collection of open sets such that X must belong to, X must be in the union, so at least it should belong to, if you take an element, it should be in one of the members of the union, at least one of the members of the union. So if you have such a collection of open sets, then we say G is an open cover. It covers the whole set. Open cover for X row. Right? Means I can build the whole metric space using these open sets. The entire metric space can be built up using just these open sets. Okay. So in other words, small pieces put together will give me the whole space. These are the small pieces, and the small pieces are all aligned, they are all open sets. So again, it is like, most people know linear algebra. This is a common statement made by many of my colleagues. Most people know linear algebra. It's a very paradoxical statement. People think they know linear algebra. That's a more correct. I think I made you a statement once. I don't know whether I made it here or not. the value of an individual is a ratio. The numerator is what he knows, the denominator is what he thinks he knows, and the denominator increasing, the value goes on decreasing. Okay. So therefore, let us say that we all have some idea about linear algebra. Instead of saying that we all know linear algebra, let us say we all have some idea about linear algebra. So one of the fundamental things, the universe in which we work in linear algebra is that of a vector space, right? What are the basic ingredients of a vector space? The vectors. Okay. Now similarly, the basic ingredients of the metric space are these open sets. We look at these basic ingredients. Okay. Now we would like to extract some vectors out of it through which we can build the whole space. Building in a vector space means you are allowed to do whatever you are allowed to do in a vector space, and the only thing that we are allowed to do in a vector space is add or scalar multiply, which is boils down to taking linear combination. So therefore there we look for a collection of sets, a vectors, build the whole space, and that is called a spanning set. If a collection of sets, vectors in a vector space do that, we call that a spanning set. Counterpart of that, this open cover is a collection of these basic ingredients which build the whole space. Now here building, we have only sets. The only building process is the union that we think of. Okay. So therefore this idea of covering is a counterpart of the notion of a spanning set in a vector space. Now we may have too many vectors in a vector space, a lot of redundant vectors also in a spanning set. So sometimes if you have a spanning set, a smaller subset may also be a spanning set. Okay. Similarly here, when I have an open cover, a smaller section of same set, maybe unnecessary things are also there or too many redundant things are there, maybe a smaller collection G1 which is contained in G is also an open cover. In that case, that is called a subcover. Okay, just like a sub-spanning set, it is a sub. Okay. G1 is a small sub-collection of G is such that G1 is also an open cover for X, then G1 is called a subcover from G. You have selected a subcover from G. Okay. Is that clear? So we have these vector spaces. The counterpart is we have this spanning set. So okay, vectors and then we add the spanning sets. We have the corresponding notion here as open cover, and then here are subsets. Subspanning sets, we have this subcover. Okay. So now these spanning sets that we had in a vector space are like sampling sets. If you just go and look at what is happening there, you really practically can find out what is happening elsewhere in the vector space. Now therefore, if you know what is happening in these open sets, then I know what is happening. So these open sets are like small neighborhoods in the country. If you go and see how is the economic situation in all these places, we will know what is happening in the country. Okay? But of course, most of the time you don't have to look too many places. One place will give you. So it's not like cook a pot of rice. You will have to check. You don't have to check every rice to see whether it is cooked or not. One rice will do. So very fantastic sampling set it has. But whereas here we may have to do many places, go and see what is happening. Okay. Now whenever we are doing sampling, we would like to make our sampling set as small as possible, and that is what leads to the notion of a basis, and we would like if that could be made finite. In that case we get a finite dimensional vector space. What happens in a finite dimensional vector space? No matter what spanning set you give, however big a spanning set you give, I can extract a finite linearly independent set which spans the whole space. So in other words, no matter what spanning set you give, there is a finite sub-spanning set which is covering the whole space, and that is the concept we would like to borrow, and that gives you the notion of compactness. Okay. So we have this finite dimensional vector space and the corresponding notion of space. These ideas are the same, only the buildings are different, the building are different, but then the notion of building is the same. Okay. So metric space, this is the definition. A metric space X row the vector space B is said to be finite dimensional vector space. A metric said to be compact. I just write it in that. If whatever open cover you give, there is a finite subcover. If a finite that is what is meant by compactness. So that notion emerges from now these building blocks open set. So we have looked at various aspects of it. Now we are going to pursue compactness for a while and see what is the connection with all these fellows. We have this notion of open sets, we have this notion of closed sets, we have the notion of completeness, we have the notion of total boundedness, we have the notion of sequence, and now we have the notion of compactness. What's the relation? Actually, when you are working in a work in a general topological space, there's a very could be different idea, but in a metric space there is a coherent connection all these fellows. Okay. Look at this notion of compactness is a little bit now. Okay, I will come to examples a little later, but I hope the idea is clear. Okay. You have these open sets are like blocks. Try to put these blocks together so that you get the whole space. Okay. It's like trying to fill up a square with discs. See, suppose you had only open balls, not open set. Problem is different. If we take now our take this rectangle as our metric space, with the usual metric. So open balls will be circles. Now if I give a number of circles which cover the whole rectangle, try to fill it up with finite number of them, we may have problems or we may not have problems. How do you cover up this? Do we have the boundary in it? We don't have the boundary in it. All sort of confusion will come into the picture. But we give freedom, not only open sets, you can also think of not only open balls, you can think of open set. It's not much because every open set is made up of open balls, because around every point there is an open ball. So every set is also made up of open balls. So but therefore we look at a general open set and then see what is the connection between all this, and then we look at some examples. I will keep these two not proved this. So now we have this notion of compactness. Okay, when open cover, the notion of subcover and the notion of compactness. See the definition of compactness. Every open cover must have a finite cover. It's not necessary that I produced one. See, remember when I talked about totally bounded set, what did I say? For any radius R, I have some finite number of open balls which cover that. But here it is not like that. You give me whichever open cover you like, from that I will extract finite number. Okay. So you have the choice to give your infinite thing, but I will extract finite from that. Okay. So I have on the one hand this notion of compactness, and on the one hand I have sequences and convergence. On the one hand I have the notion of this total boundedness. I am going to connect all these things. That's it. There is a connection between all these fellows. So this connection is what is important, because in metric spaces it makes us life easy that we will look at compactness point of view of open covers whenever it is convenient, from the point of view of total boundedness whenever it is convenient, from the point of view of sequential things whenever it is convenient. Okay. So different problems require using the notion of compactness in different perspectives. It is the same thing we are looking at in metric spaces. The same thing will be looked at different angles. So what I do is, suppose I take a compact metric. Oh, okay. Let me make a few comments before that. Okay. Now suppose I have a metric space X rho and I have a set S which is a subset of X. Okay. Now whenever you have a subset of metric space, that itself becomes a metric space with the same metric, because the same distance can be used only in a smaller collection. Then S rho is itself a metric space. Okay. Now look at only this metric space. How do open sets look like in this metric? First of all, open sets uses the notion of open balls. Every point must have a open ball around it which is in that set. So therefore we should first look at how do open balls look like in this metric space. So therefore, how an open ball of radius r the point center S, where S is a point in S row, look like in S row. In this metric space, in any metric space, open ball, what open ball means. So now we should define this as BRS. What is the definition? It looks at all the x's in where? S, in that set, which are within a distance of R from that. Because now our universe is S. I am looking at that metric space S. So an open ball is all those points in that world which are within a distance of R from the center that we have S. Now on the other hand, what's BRS, the open ball of radius R centered at S in the metric space X row looks like, let's BRS will be now the set of all y in where? I am looking at in this bigger universe now. All those points y in X which are at a distance, within a distance from R. Okay. So when I am looking at suppose I am looking at the 3 space, okay, of the living world, and I take this subset, the plane, the floor. So if I take a point on the floor and now I am looking at an open ball in the floor, it is a disk. But if I now look at that point as a point in the space and I look at the open ball, it is the sphere, and that is what that means. When you are looking in the plane, it is those points in that count which are within a distance R. But when you are looking at the bigger universe, it is all those points in that bigger universe that count. Okay, so that is what the difference. Now therefore, what is the connection between this and that? Right? If I have taken that big ball and that cut it in the plane and I get that section, which is what I call as the, okay. So the section of a sphere through the center is precisely the disk. Okay. It's geometry. Topology is geometry. Okay. It's basically a geometrical idea. Okay. So what does this give an idea? Any open ball in S is essentially an open ball in the bigger space intersected with S, and this automatically therefore tells us any open set in S will be an intersection of an open set in the bigger space with S. Consequently, any open set in S is of S where is an open set in the. So whenever you want something in the small space, take a corresponding thing in the big space and intersect it with S, and that portion alone is called the corresponding version in the smaller universe. Okay. If you have the collection of all engineering graduates in India and you want to have only all the engineering graduates in Bangalore, just intersect, that is all. You get all the engineering graduates in Bangalore, that is it. Okay. So you have a big universe, whenever you want some topological idea in the smaller universe, take the corresponding idea in the big universe and intersect it with S, you get that. Now, okay, anyway, I will erase this. Since S rho is a metric space, what is meant by an open cover for S? Now look at the small universe. What is meant by an open cover for S rho? It is a collection of open sets in S rho which cover S. So let us say GS is an open cover for S rho, means GS is a collection of open sets in S such that their union is S. Okay? But what is meant by open set in S? All of them are simply of the form G intersection. Yes. So therefore there is a collection of open sets whose intersection with S will cover the whole space. That is GS is a collection open sets G. Okay, let me write it like this. Okay, the collection of open sets in X rho intersected with S. Therefore, GS can be written as, I will simply write it notationally as G intersection S. This is a notation, okay, where G is a collection of open sets in X rho. So, we want to get a collection of open set in S. All you have to do is take a collection of open sets in the big space and intersect it with S, and we have, because this is an open cover, S is equal to the union of all the GS's, such that GS belongs to GS, because it is an open cover, but all the GS's are of the form where G is some collection of open sets, or we can say that it is just the union of all the G's, G belonging to G, and that intersected with S is equal to S. Okay. What does that mean? If A intersection B is A, what does that tell about A? If A intersection B is equal to A itself, then everything in A must be in B. Therefore, A is a subset of B. That is, S is contained in the union of G. So, we can say that this capital G, we will call that open cover for set S in the whole space. It covers, it is not exactly equal, but it will cover. So, what is meant by an open cover for the whole space? It is a collection of open sets whose union is exactly equal to X. Open cover for a subset means a collection of open sets whose union will certainly include S. Okay. So, therefore, this gives us the definition: a collection G, of open sets in X rho is called an open cover for a subset S of X if S is contained in the union of all the G's that G belongs to G. When S is the whole space, the union is contained in this, so the two together will give you it is equal to this. So this definition takes care of all, whether it is a subset of, so when it is covered, it's completely encompassed. When you take the union, whatever you have in mind has been encompassed by these sets. Is that okay? Right. So now you have this, similarly you have subcover. If G1 is a subcollection of this such that S is contained in that, again it is called a subcover. Similarly, the notion of subcover. Set becomes a compact subset if every cover has a open subcover. In that notation, therefore, a subset S is compact that is the definition, has every open cover has a finite subcover. Okay, so that's the fundamental idea of compactness. Whatever you do, whatever collection of open sets you give, finite number of them are enough to take care of the set I have in mind. That's why it's called compact. It can be neatly, compactly packed within a finite number of things. It's not like you have infinite number of suitcases and whatever you want you pack, and then there is less restriction, like when you get a postdoctoral fellowship or a graduate teaching assistantship in some university, you go there, you find that the travel agent says you can't take more than 26-inch suitcase, the weight should not be 23 kgs, all kinds of conditions. You go better pack, you don't think that you can take your books, all your clothes, all your shoes, everything in pack. No, you have to dump many of these things and take the minimum thing with you. So that is what is meant by you travel compact. Okay, so that's the idea of compactness. Everything can be neatly packed in a finite number. Even if somebody is generous and say you have all these suitcases, you will be able to compactly pack it into finite number of them. That is what is meant by compactness. Okay, so now let us now take a compact metric space. So suppose I have a compact metric space. Now I take a sequence. So say I am trying to connect these notions now. So I am going to take a sequence of elements, a sequence in this metric space. So I am going to take a sequence in a compact metric space. When I take a sequence, I am not saying all the terms are different. I may have one, again repeating one, again repeat one, then bring two, then again put back one. So a sequence may look like this in real numbers also, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 3, like that. This is also a sequence. So I may have when I have a sequence, it may happen that only a finite number of them are distinct. The same thing goes on repeating, or infinite number of them are distinct. So let us distinguish the two cases. Okay. The simpler case is case 1, only finite number of them of the xn are distinct. So let us take for example, you are writing a binary sequence. When you write a binary sequence, how many members are distinct there? At most 2. Because 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, that's all you have got in your disposal. So things will have to repeat. So therefore, you may have only a finite number of them. When writing a sequence in the real numbers, it may be a binary sequence, in which case only a finite number of the xn's are distinct, namely 0 and 1 are the only 2 distinct things that are possible. So that is the case. Or you may be writing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, where an infinite number of them are distinct. So let us take the simple case, a finite number of them distinct. Now if you have a finite number of them and you have to fill infinite number of boxes, the terms, somebody has to repeat himself infinite number of times. This is the simple pigeonhole principle. Okay. There are infinite number of pigeons and they have to be packed in this finite number of boxes. Okay. So I take first term and go and put it in that box if that term is equal to that. Otherwise in that box. So I have an infinite number of pigeons. I have only a finite number of pigeonholes. So one of the pigeonholes must contain infinite number of pigeons. This is a fundamental principle which all high school students probably nowadays know it, because they all prepare for the math Olympiad, where the first thing they teach is the fundamental principle of pigeonholes. Okay. So very important concept in combinatories. So what therefore it means is, hence in this case one terms must repeat infinitely many times. That is, there exists a sequence of positive integers n1 less than n2 less than n3 etc., such that xn1 repeats again as xn2 repeats again as x, and so on. All these terms are the same. One term repeats infinitely often. It may not be repeating immediately. It will come as the 10th term, then again it will come as the 18th term, again come as the 24th term, again come as the 32nd term, and so on. So, but it will go on because it has to come infinite number of times. Now what does that mean? If I now take this subsequence xn1, xn2, xn3, xnk, it automatically converges to that common value. Okay. So let us say x is equal to that x is equal to this, and therefore the subsequence xnk of xn converges. So therefore in this case the given sequence has a convergent subsequence. Therefore xn has a convergent subsequence. As a convergent subsequence. Now let us look at the second case. In the second case, not just a finite number of the things, infinite number of these elements are distinct. So case 2, infinite number of these terms in xn are distinct. Deliberately going through this very slow, because these are the ideas that must get in your mind quickly and nicely. forever. Now what happens is the reverse of this will happen. That means there will be a sequence such that xn1 is not equal to xn2, xn2 is not equal to xn3, all these things are distinct. That is positive integer such that xnj is not they are all distinct, nobody is equal. The infinite number of them of different elements are. Now I want to see whether even in this case I can get a convergent subsequence. In the previous case, given the sequence, there was a convergent subsequence. I want to know whether there will be a convergent subsequence for xn. Suppose there is no convergent subsequence, what will happen? There cannot be any limit point, right? Because if there is a convergent subsequence, that limit will become a limit point. Okay. So suppose there is no limit point. That means what? Nobody in that space can be a limit point. That means everybody can be isolated. That means, so take, what does that mean? Take any x, in x. Now I draw a small open ball with that center as x and see how many elements of these are there. If infinite number of them are there, maybe that point is a limit point. So I will reduce the radius. If for every radius I get infinite number of points, what happens? That becomes a limit point. But I know it is not a limit point. So there must be some radius where only a finite number of points will lie inside. Okay, so therefore there is a radius that will depend on the point x, at which point I am looking, which is greater than 0, such that Brxx has only finite number of, something happened here, points in S, points of S, or what shall I call it? This set S, I will call this as S, as xn1, xn2, etc. Finite number of points of S. Okay. Now this I can do for every x. Take any point x, not a limit point, and therefore there must be an open ball which has only a finite number of points. Take all these open balls. What can I say about this? They are all open sets. So this is a collection of open sets. It covers x because every point is the center of one open ball. The points of x are in that. So G is an open cover for x. Is that clear? So what I am doing is, take a point, there is a ball. Take another point, there is a ball. Take all these balls, put them together. The center of these cover the whole space. So I have already the center itself covering the entire thing. So G, and it is every open ball is an open set, therefore it is an open cover for x, and this is where the compactness comes. Because it is an open cover for x, and I started with x as a compact set, it must have a finite subcover. Okay, and What else can I say? An open cover for X such that BRXX has only finite number of points of S for every X in X. For every X, this ball will have only, every one of these open balls can contain only finite number of points, the way we have constructed it. Is that clear? The construction is important. Every point is not a limit point, therefore there is an enclosure which contains only finite number of points. Take all these enclosures, together they cover X, and now X is compact, therefore there exists a finite subcover. What is meant by finite? What is meant by subcover? Sum of these. Finite means only a finite number of these. Okay. So that means if the centers, finite number of centers must be there, and those finite number of corresponding radius. That is, there exists y1, y2, yn in X such that B r y1, y1, etc. B r yn covers X. Okay, their union will be all that. Is that clear? All these laddus cover the space. I know there is only a finite number of laddus that will cover because it is a compact set. Now it is covering the whole of X, and therefore it must cover this S. All universe is within these n balls. Therefore, these S elements must be in this n balls. S has infinite number of elements, but there are only finite number of. For one of the balls must have infinite number. But the way we constructed, every ball will have only finite number. So you got a contradiction. Okay, and therefore, okay, so let me write. Therefore, S is contained by these balls. Since S is infinite and we have only finite balls, one of these has infinite number of S elements. That is a contradiction, because we have constructed this ball in such a way that every one of them will have only finite number of S elements. So all this problem come because we said that suppose the limit point, and therefore it will have a limit point, that means there will be a convergent subsequence. Therefore, yes, therefore Xn has a convergent subsequence. So what is the conclusion? Whenever you have a compact set, in that compact metric space, whatever sequence you choose, it will have to have a convergent subsequence. Every sequence in a compact metric space must have a convergent subsequence. Okay. So, conclusion, special array all the way here. So, okay, let me write conclusion, maybe conclusion. Fact. So somehow or the other, the compactness is connected to the notion of sequences and convergence through this. Every compact, the moment it is compact, then whatever sequence they give you there, you are sure there is going to be at least one convergent. There may be many convergent subsequences. The whole sequence may converge, but one thing you can definitely conclude is that there must be at least one subsequence of this given sequence which converges. Okay. So therefore we give a name. Whenever metric space has this property, in a metric, if a metric space is such that every sequence is a convergent subsequence, we call it sequentially compact. Okay. What we have is compact implies compact. So definition, these are all terminologies to make life. I want to write in sequence as a convergent, so we will sequentially compact. So definition, X rho is said to be sequentially if every subsequence, this is important, every characteristic property, wherever you go it will happen, every sequence rho a convergent subsequence. And therefore what we have proved is a proposition. Therefore we have our conclusion now can be written as a proposition or a theorem or a lemma or a result. Let us call it as result 1. X rho compact implies X rho okay. So that is one connection between this notion of open sets, covers, etc. we had. On the other hand, we have sequences and convergence and so on and so forth. Okay. Now we are going to make more connections, because finally we want to know in various ways how does a compact set look like in a metric space. So now if I prove any property for a sequentially metric space, it will be automatically true for a compact metric space, because every compact metric space is also sequentially compact, because it now looks a little bit manageable. Their covers and all look very terrible, which I am not used to, but now convergence and all I am very much used to. So I brought it down to that level. So now let us look at a sequentially compact metric space. Compact metric space. Now, quickly a couple of things that will follow immediately. I am going to this with the other two notions I had, completeness, total boundedness, etc. Now I am going to connect it to that. Okay. So now look at completeness. What is completeness? Every Cauchy sequence must be convergent. Okay, right. So I want to check that. So I will take a Cauchy sequence. The moment I take a Cauchy sequence, this fellow will sequential compact will immediately say he must have a convergent subsequence. But if a subsequence of a Cauchy sequence converges, the whole sequence itself will converge, and we are done. Okay, and immediately we get completeness. Okay, so extend Cauchy sequence through by sequential compactness. That is our hypothesis. We are assuming that X rho is sequential. implies, since Xn is Cauchy, which Cauchy, everybody is clustering. So if some small part of it tries to go somewhere, everybody is dragged along with him. Okay. So since Xn is Cauchy, the sequence Xn itself converges. Implies so sequential compactness directly completeness of the space. So compactness implies sequential compactness, therefore implies completeness also. The moment you have a compact metric space, you can do nice limiting there, no problem at all. Okay. The nice thing about compact, that is why we do it, because all our approximation things that we do are iterative processes, and then we want to make sure that the sequence converges. In some form of compactness we will be working. Okay. All these theorems will be working in that sort of situation. Right. The other notion I said is totally bounded, but it is not totally bounded. Okay. We will then ask what is meant by totally bounded. Then we look at the opposite. What is meant by totally bounded? Totally bounded means whatever radius you give, there is a finite number of balls of that radius which the whole thing. And therefore, not totally bounded means I am a very good cricket player means any ball that is hit for a six. Not a good player means there is at least one ball which I will not be able to hit for a six. So therefore, there is at least one radius for which I will not be able to fit finite number of balls with that radius, which will sweep the whole space. That means I need an infinite number of balls. The moment I have infinite number of balls, the centers form an infinite sequence, and they are all at a distance of minimum r from each other. If they are minimum at a distance r from each other, there is no any subsequence converging, which will violate sequential compactness, and therefore sequential compactness will automatically force totally bounded. Okay. So that is the second thing I will do. This is 1. 2, x rho not totally bounded implies there exists r greater than 0 such that, and a sequence xn in x such that Br x1 etc. Br xk cannot cover x for any finite r, for any r. That means an infinite number of them to go to the whole space, which implies xn is a sequence in x rho such that the distance between xn and xm is greater than or equal to r for every n and m. This construction we have gone through before, so therefore, which says that x has no convergent subsequence, because everybody, like Ashtagrahas, sitting in different directions, they don't want to meet each other, they don't want to come anywhere near each other. Okay, so these particles, the force that they are kept at a distance minimum of r from each other, so therefore they can't come closer, which implies x rho cannot be sequentially compact, because there is a sequence which is convergent subsequence. What have we got? Implies So logic, not P implies not Q, therefore Q implies P. So therefore, so the logic is, and therefore sequentially compact implies, so both. Therefore sequentially implies complete and totally bounded. So that's our result too. Result 2 is X row sequentially compact implies X row is complete and totally bounded. Yeah. This one. Where is it? Cannot cover for any k. You are right. No finite number of them can cover. Okay. So we have, now we will complete the cycle. We will say that complete and totally bounded implies compactness. Okay. So what will happen is, will say this fellow implies him, 2 will say that fellow implies him, 3rd will say that fellow implies back compact. So all 3 will become equivalent. So compactness can be thought of as sequentially compactness, or can be thought of completeness and totally bounded put together. So that will be my third slide to just indicate. Okay, so next we show we start with X row complete and totally bounded. So details, I will just show you what is happening. Okay. So we want to show that X row is compact. Immediately that will form compact. Suppose not. What is meant by compact? Every open cover must have a finite subcover. Not compact means there is at least one open cover which will fail to have a finite subcover. Okay, so suppose not. There exists, this implies there exists an open cover that it has no that is it went by saying not compact. Okay. Therefore, what we will do is this total boundedness and complete, which is the hypothesis, will lead to a contradiction of this statement. That is the general. Whenever reduction absurd, you assume the contrary and show that the hypothesis leads to a contradiction. Okay. Now let me just indicate that X row is totally bounded. That is given to us. What is meant by totally bounded? Again, for every radius there is a finite number of open paths which cover the space. So let us take the radius as 1 for r equal to 1, there is now I have this finite number of balls on the one side. On the other side I have these open sets. Now suppose each one of these open balls can be covered by a finite number of G fellows. This fellow requires 10, that fellow requires 12, this fellow requires 18. Finite number of fellows put together, finite number of times will give you finite number. So all these balls will get covered by a finite number of G sets, which means the whole space will be covered by a finite number of G sets. Therefore, if all these are covered, if each of these number of G sets, then X itself will be covered by finite number of G sets. That is a contradicting star. We call this a star because covered by a. First, I did a multi-section, not dissection. I pieced the whole space into this finite number of balls and said that you are having finite G set, you are having finite G sets, you are having finite G sets, then totally you will have finite G sets, but that is not allowed. Okay. So therefore, at least one of these balls fail to be covered by finite number of G sets. At least one of these balls, because every ball is covered by finite G set, X will be covered by finite G set. So therefore, there exists one ball of at least one, therefore there exists at least one B radius 1 center X1 which is not covered by finite number of G sets. So let me draw a picture. This open ball requires infinite number to cover it. Okay, that is what it means. Okay. Is that clear? Right. Right. This lies in this whole space. That whole space is totally bounded. So once a set is totally bounded, any subset is totally bounded. So this open ball is totally bounded. Okay, this is a subset which is totally bounded, and therefore this is totally bounded. See, now what I did, which was totally bounded, I applied some idea to it to get to this ball. Now this ball is totally bounded, I applied the same idea to this to get another open ball. Now only thing is, now I reduce the radius to half. This is being totally bounded, I can cover this by a finite balls. And because this cannot be covered by a finite number of G sets, one of these half balls cannot be covered by finite number of G sets. Okay. So now this process will go on, bootstrap up. call this as double slit. Can cover B1 X1 by finite at least B of there exists at least one B is not by right. Now you know what's going on. Inside this fellow, you cover this half ball now by what balls? Half squared balls. Then you get one half squared ball which cannot be covered by finite number of G sets. Inside that you get half cubed balls and so on and so forth. Continue this process. Continue this process to get B1 X1, B half X2, B half squared X3 and so on, none of which can be covered by finite number of G sets. Okay. That's the first thing that we have constructed these balls. We reduced the radii and made sure that they are not covered by a finite number of G sets. Right. Now, what is the distance between X1 is chosen? X1 and X2 will be less than 1. The distance between X2 and X3 will be less than half. X3 and X4 will be less than half squared. We have and the distance between Xn and Xn plus 1 is less than 1 over 2 to the power of n minus 1. Now, there, this is all we have constructed. Now, yes, we get Xn is a Cauchy sequence. Okay, Xn to Xm will be the tail end of the halves in geometric series, which converts the tail can be made small. Now we use the hypothesis completeness, which has been hiding from us all the while. We have so far used only total bond. Once for Xn converges to X. Which is in, because it is converts to a, okay. The last step is the following. G is an open cover. What does that mean? Everything in X is covered. Therefore, that little x must have been covered. That means there must be one open set here which contains that point G. Right? X belongs to G. Now G is an open set. The moment somebody is in an open set, there is a whole ball around it which will be in that open set. Okay. Therefore, since G there exists R greater, okay, so we have this Now I will give you a simple things that you should remember. Xn converges to X, right? Therefore, for sufficiently large n, Xn will come inside this sphere. That is for clear. And then we are having all these balls, radius going down like 1 by 2 squared, 1 by 2 cubed, etc. So for sufficiently large n, 1 by 2 to the n will be very much small, such that if I draw the sphere of radius 1 by 2 to the n minus 1 and I get in Xn, that will also be inside that ball. So therefore all you have to show is exists large, so that take this vector that will be contained in. Okay, we push the Xn inside first and push it deep inside, so that now the small radius keeps it inside itself. Okay. Now what does that mean? This whole ball is inside, that is inside G. That means this ball has been covered by one G set, which is false. None of these can be covered by finite number of G sets. So this exercise says to the construction expected that none of these can be by finite number of G sets. Okay. So therefore, what did we get? Suppose it is not compact. That was false. Three that we have is the following, which keep repeatedly applied. Any questions? Result 3. Totally bounded. Combine all this, you get the theorem, the following are equivalent. Everybody is each implies the other. Rho compact to X rho sequentially compact therefore is viewed in different languages, once in the form of open covers, once in the form of having convergent subsequences, once in terms of bounded and complete. Okay. So it depends on what is the problem that you are solving. It is highly topological in nature, then probably the open cover idea will work. If you are looking at approximations, etc., it is the convergence that is going to work. And if it is, you are looking at trying to put things inside some bounds, then it is the total boundedness that you are looking at. So therefore, it is it's always needs to the same thing in different forms, and realize that these are all the same thing. And again I repeat the same poem of Kambaramana, you should look at it. If somebody saw it, the topologist saw it as open cover, he will always be talking about open cover. He refuses to see that it can be seen as sequential compactness. It is a sequential, you are always looking at subsequences. but then the person who sees it as a whole is very happily converting this or that or this, whichever is convenient, he uses it and goes along merrily. So what you have to do is look the same weapon which can be used in 3 days. The same weapon as covers or sequential convergences or as boundedness. Okay. Now it is actually most often we will be working with complete metric spaces. So automatically therefore the only thing that you will have to look at is this total compactness. Looks like easier thing to look at, boundedness and total boundedness. Whenever you are working in a complete metric space, the only thing that you have to look at for whether it is compact or not is to look whether it is totally bounded. So now I have stated all these things for a metric space. What about this for subsets? We will interpret all these things for subsets. It takes only 5 minutes, and then we will have a complete notion of compact sets. Okay. And one of the most fundamental metric space is the real line. In the real line, boundedness and total boundedness very trivial. So therefore, dispose it off. In any finite dimensional vector space, whether you live in our R1, R2, R3, etc., in all these places the total boundedness is the same as boundedness. So there it's very easy. The next spaces that we come across very seen in differential equations or anywhere is the space of continuous functions. When we go to the continuum, therefore there we have to look at what is meant by total boundedness. What is meant by total boundedness in the space of continuous functions? For that, therefore, we must introduce the notion of continuity in the general context of metric spaces. So therefore, in the next class, I will look at this compactness at sets of metric spaces, then get continuity. So before I close, quote unquote close, there was a request of students whether we can have the class on Monday and Wednesday or Tuesdays and Thursdays. Okay. In response to them, I will tell that there is a problem this week because we are having class on Tuesday and Wednesday. Okay. Next week, we will have the class on Tuesday and Thursday. Again, no problem. Is there any problem? This week I will have a class tomorrow also, and next week we will have class on Tuesday and Thursday. After that, we will take a break. Okay, before the semester starts, I have to finish certain travel things complete. Then again, when we come back in August first week, when the semester starts, we will reorganize ourselves to see where we continue and how many people are interested. Next level of function. So what we would have done this time is essentially all the basic aspects in a metric space. Then we will apply to the special case of non-linear spaces, then the special case of inner product spaces and Hilbert spaces, non-linear spaces and Banach spaces, and inner products and Hilbert spaces. So 2 big chapters. If there is enough interest, we will continue with that when the August term starts. So we will have a class tomorrow, we will have a class on Tuesday and Thursday next week. What I would suggest is when we finish the class on Thursday, before the first week of August, those of you interested in continuing this, please send me a mail. Okay, I will see and then talk to Professor Narahari and then see how this whole thing can be arranged. So as of this part of the course, it will end next Thursday, and so therefore there are 3 more classes, one tomorrow, next week Tuesday and Thursday.